2311 Racing and Spire Motorsports will race as open teams in 2025, and RFK Racing has a major announcement coming on Tuesday. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got quite a few NASCAR stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brendan Poole's 2025 Mac Door scheme that we'll see in a lot of races, including at Daytona. Very similar to last year's scheme that Brendan Poole had for 2024. I think it looks pretty good, all things considered. Alf Prime usually does a really great job. It looks pretty solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Daytona. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kyle Busch's 2025 Lucas Oil scheme that we'll see in multiple races throughout the 2025 season. I believe this is the first Kyle Busch paint scheme we've got for 2025. It's unknown if the other sponsors will be coming back for 2025 at this time, but I do think his scheme looks really good, and it looks very, very solid and pretty great, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Moto GP. As it was announced earlier today that Moto GP has officially a new logo. Looking at this logo, it looks very, very blank, and it does not look very good, to be honest. It just looks kind of boring to me. I love the old school ones where it had the red and kind of like the stripe checkers they had on the side. This one is just so boring to me. It's just not really much to it. It does not look that good. I feel like that's the FIA for you, kind of sucking out the energy of it seems like at this point. I'm not a big fan of this. It doesn't look great. I think the logo just sucks overall. And to me, it's a terrible look and a terrible logo that MotoGP has. And I think it's a terrible logo, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst this weekend competing in the 2024 Baja 1000 and was able to pick up the win in this year's Baja 1000. This is back-to-back years for Riley Herbst in the Baja 1000. Remember, he of course won the Baja 1000 in 2023 and has now gone back-to-back. Riley Herbst's family has a lot of success, of course, on the off-road scene. I believe his father, Troy, has won the Baja 1000 in the past, if I'm not mistaken. So to see Riley Herbst not only win 1 year in a row, but 2 years in a row, to me, is very, very awesome. I know people criticize Riley Herbst for his talent, but you got to be a good driver to compete at Baja and be successful. You have to have a ton of talent, and this proves that Riley Herbst does have a lot of talent. He's proved me wrong over the course of the last couple of years on the talent side of things, and just a really huge congratulations to Riley. He's shown so much improvement. It's good to see him winning another Baja 1000. It's a massive win for him. He'll be looking to go 3 in a row. I guarantee you he will run the Baja 1000 once again, most likely in 2025. Congratulations to him on winning this year's Baja 1000. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Will Brown. This weekend, the season finale for the Supercars Championship took place, and Will Brown was able to be your 2024 Supercars champion. With him finishing second, I believe, behind Brock Feeney in race number 1 at Adelaide, he had enough points over Brock Feeney to score the championship. I believe this is Will Brown's first Supercars championship, if I'm not mistaken. He's been, of course, competing with the Red Bull family, with the Red Bull Arm Pole Racing Organization, took over this past year for Shane Van Gisbergen, who, of course, has transitioned over to the NASCAR things and will be going full-time in the Cup Series in 2025. I think Will Brown is a driver who's been rumored also to be going to RCR part-time in 2025 in a select number of races. I really hope it does end up coming true because I'd love to see Will Brown come over and race in NASCAR. But this is a big win for Will. Congratulations to Will Brown. An absolute well-deserved championship. He probably will be back full-time in Supercars next year, but it's a massive win. Major congratulations and well-deserved championship for Will. Congratulations to him on being your 2024 Supercars champion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sydney Sweeney. Now, if you were browsing social media earlier today, you probably saw a post from Sydney Sweeney on her Instagram page. And one thing we noticed is that she was getting behind the wheel of one of the NASCAR Experience racing cars at Charlotte Motor Speedway. And she actually got to take a few laps around Charlotte Motor Speedway. And she had Ryan Blaney helping her out in a pretty big way. This is really, really huge for NASCAR. Sydney Sweeney is one of the biggest actresses out there, very well known. She's going to be in some sort of movie around one of the greatest female boxers ever, and she's been in a lot of big shows like Euphoria over the years. And she, of course, has a massive, massive following on social media. This is really huge. This could get a lot of eyes on NASCAR. I really think it can, because having someone like her get involved in a sport in some sort of capacity, regardless of what she's doing, is very, very huge. And maybe we'll see her involved with NASCAR more in the future. I did see Charlotte Motor Speedway comment on the Instagram post indicating that we may see her give the command for the 2025 Coke 600, which I think would be really cool if that ended up happening. But this is such a cool thing to see. Never would have thought I'd see Sydney Sweeney at a NASCAR race, to be honest with you. We've seen her doing a lot of things in recent years. Pretty exciting stuff, and I think it's so cool to see that she got to drive around Charlotte Motor Speedway. Pretty awesome stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about wrap side skirts. Now, I believe it was posted by Skylar Fox, who does a lot of design stuff for some teams, who's done some really good concept schemes, and he was talking about the fact that he noticed some teams didn't have wrap side skirts at Hendrick Motorsports like Chase Elliott, actually Kyle Larson, but you had guys like Chase Elliott who did have wrap side skirts. Well, Carson Osbar commented below the tweet indicating that wrap side skirts will be coming back on the side for the Chevrolets in 2025. And Dale Jr. even gave a really big thumbs up and was really happy to see this as well. Now, I did see Ricky Santos Jr. kind of comment on that by saying we've been doing that over at JTG Doherty Racing, but of course Spire Motorsports, that we're going to talk about in a little bit, is getting a lot more direct orders from Chevrolet, while JTG Doherty Racing, they're kind of not part of Chevy family fully. They're also going to have changes with their ownership going into 2025, so I understand why they probably do things a lot different than other organizations like Spire. But I'm really happy to see that the side skirts are going to be wrapped or painted going forward. I think that having wrapped side skirts or painted side skirts is going to make the cars look a lot better. I think the next-gen cars do have a lot of good things going for them. I don't really have an issue with the number placement on the car, but I think having wrapped side skirts is a really big positive step in the right direction for them. They needed to do that for a while, and I'm glad to see that they're moving on to make that move and make those changes, the necessary changes that I think are really, really needed. So having wrapped side skirts, I think, is really awesome. It's an amazing thing to see, and glad to see the NASCAR is finally caving in, especially for the Chevrolet camp, and they're going to be doing that for 2025. Really exciting stuff. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carlos Sainz. As it was announced on Friday morning that Carlos Sainz will be testing for Williams at the Abu Dhabi Formula One test in 2025. He'll get behind the wheel for the test that will take place once the season concludes in about a month or so from now. Carlos Sainz, remember, of course, will be joining the Williams F1 organization in 2025. And there is a lot of hype around Carlos Sainz going over to Williams. You're going to have one of the most talented all-around lineups over there in Formula One at Williams. You're going to have Alex Albon, who's shown a lot of improvement over the last couple years and has been really good with Williams in recent years. And then you're going to have Carlos Sainz, who's won a couple races in Formula One this year, the first time he's had multiple wins in a season. And he's just been super, super strong throughout the 2024 campaign. And I think that he is going to bring a lot to the table to Williams. And I would not be surprised or shocked going into 2025 if you do see Carlos Sainz have an outside chance and opportunity to maybe compete for a not championship, but compete for some podiums near the end of the year and maybe get a lot of points paying finishes. We could see the most points and basically would be really good for the manufacturer as well, Mercedes. To me, I really expect Carlos Sainz to be very solid in the 2025 year, and I think this is a really, really good move for them to bring in. And I think getting to work with them and get that experience of working with Williams, to me, is really awesome. And I'm very happy nonetheless to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to test with the team, get the chemistry moving forward, and work with Alex, which I think is something that really needs to happen to get that chemistry going and working. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the AllStar Circuit of Champions. As there was a report about High Limit Racing and the USAC pages on Twitter that AllStar Circuit of Champions is officially going to be returning in 2025. Obviously, AllStar Circuit of Champions, which was owned by Tony Stewart not too long ago, had been around for many years, I think from like the early 2000s up until 2023, when Kyle Larson and Brad Sweet had purchased the licensing to the AllStar Circuit of Champions and had purchased the series from Tony Stewart, who of course is focusing on a family, just had a young baby by the way, and also of course focusing fully on NHRA and getting out of NASCAR in a pretty big way as well. I don't really know who will be owning this at this point. Maybe this is kind of part of the high limit racing branch, which tells me they might be expanding in some pretty big ways. And maybe we're going to see some drivers from the high limit racing series or World of Outlaws perhaps come into play and race in that. That could certainly be a potential possibility there. And I think it's cool they're bringing it back. I'm just definitely shocked in a way to see that it's coming back, considering that the All-Star Circuit of Champions have been gone for as long as it's been gone. See it actually coming back. I think it's really cool to see that they are officially bringing that back. But I think it's also for some people a little bit confusing, considering everyone thought, hey, this is supposed to be gone. We're not supposed to be bringing this back at this point. But I am very happy to see that a series has been around for many, many years and had a lot of success for a long time. I'm really glad to see they're officially bringing it back. I think it's really exciting stuff for sure, and I can't wait to see which drivers they decide to bring it in. Maybe they find a way to bring drivers like Chase Elliott or Bubba Wallace or something like that out to the event, or maybe Shane Van Gisbergen perhaps. I think that'd be really cool. Bring Connor Zilic into play. That'd be pretty exciting. Nonetheless, it's really great to see and glad to see that they're officially bringing back the All-Star Circuit of Champions in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NBM Motorsports. As Carl Long confirmed on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio talking to Jack Garrett yesterday morning, that NBM Motorsports will be back officially in 2025 in the NASCAR Cup Series and has confirmed they will be running the 2025 Daytona 500 and they are going to be getting a lease engine from Ford for the 2025 Daytona 500. Carl did not confirm which car or what number they're going to be using for the Daytona 500 and what driver they are going to be using. Nonetheless, this is really, really awesome to see. NBM Motorsports has been back around the garage in the last year or so, and they've been competing in a lot more events. I believe this is in 2024. They ran the most races I think they've ran since 2021. I think they ran close to half the season this year, I'm pretty sure, and they were on the track on a pretty consistent basis. And I think it's cool that they're officially going to be returning to the racetrack in 2025. Now, my question is, what driver will they have for 2025? I have to think Timmy Hill is the most likely possibility, right? Timmy Hill has made a lot of starts for many years at NBM Motorsports. You go back to like 2013 or 2014. That could certainly be a possibility. I know Timmy's probably going to be back doing some stuff in the Truck Series in 2025 with his own organization, but I have to think he would be one of the early candidates and lead favorites to get behind the wheel of this car for the Daytona 500. I also have to think someone else, maybe like a Sage Karam if he wanted to run, maybe Connor Daly perhaps, maybe like David Starr who's ran a Daytona 500 a couple times. I believe that could certainly be a possibility, but it's good to see we're going to have another team on the track, and I think the Daytona 500, as more of these entries start to get announced that are open, to have an official confirmed it, I think you're going to see a lot more really exciting announcements going forward in that, and I think it's really cool that officially, maybe Haley Deegan, who knows, but I think it's really awesome nonetheless to see that NBM Motorsports is officially coming back and they will be running the 2025 Daytona 500. I'm really excited for them and looking forward to see that they will be showing up at the Daytona 500 in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chad Johnson. As it was announced on Friday early afternoon that Chad Johnson will be joining Legacy Motor Club starting in 2025 or effective immediately. He will not be a crew chief for the organization though in 2025. Instead, he'll be going to a different department. His role is going to be manager of race engineering. Legacy Motor Club has been hiring so many people over the course of the last few months. If you actually go through the Venn diagram, and Eric Giesep did a really good diagram on this, they started off the year with a lot of different people. Dave Ellens was there, Ben Bayshore was there. I believe they had Joey Cohen as basically one of the general managers and some other people coming in. They fired the team from the 84 at one point. They moved Ben Bayshore over to work with Eric Jones. We're not even sure if he'll be the crew chief for Eric Jones this year. Brian Campy got put in as a technical director, got moved to crew chief for John Hunter at the end of the year. They have made so many changes, and I think while Chad Johnson, I'm just a little worried that Chad Johnson is not going to bring a lot to the table on the engineering side of things. Chad Johnson, in my opinion, is kind of an crew chief. He really did not do good with Tony Stewart. He struggled with Kyle Larson after 2017 and got fired fired in the middle of 2020 from Chip Ganassi Racing because the setups they were given to Matt Kenseth just were not fitting Matt Kenseth's style. They were given setups to work for Kyle Larson. At that point, Kyle Larson had been fired. And then while Ryan Preece showed a lot of improvement at the end of the year, I think a lot more of that was the driver than the crew chief. I really hope when it comes to the race engineering side of things, he can really help this program move forward. But realistically, I just don't see it with him. I don't really get that feeling that he's going to come in here and help that program really get up to the next level. That's what I'm worried about, is that I'm worried they're not going to be able to really step up to the plate and set the world on fire, because Legacy Motor Club for me was the most disappointing team of the 2024 season, and there's a lot of pressure on this team to get a lot better, and I do think there's a chance that they will improve, but I'm not sure Chad Johnson is going to be the guy that can really improve that program. I don't think the drivers are the problem, though. Eric Jones and John Nemechek, to me, are not the problems at Legacy Motor Club, so I really hope things can get better for that program in 2025, but I'm not exactly sure if Chad Johnson is going to be the guy that's going to be able to fix and solve the problems currently going on at that organization. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're doing a little bit of a silly season update. Now, over the course of the last couple days, fellow NASCAR Nostalgia account on Instagram put out a very interesting couple of tweets in regards to some potential silly season moves that could be happening for 2025. Earlier today, he talked about Rick Ware Racing. He mentioned some very interesting things that he is third, and it doesn't sound like everything is fully set at the moment. He mentions drivers like Cody Ware and Cory Joy, and isn't even sure if they're going to run a second full-time entry at this point in 2025. There's been even rumors going around that Rick Ware Racing could sell their program to an organization with a lot of money over the last week or so, though I do expect that Rick Ware will still be around in some sort of capacity in 2025. Beginning with Cory LaJoie. We're going to talk about Cory here in just a short little bit, but Cory LaJoie has been obviously linked to be back with Rick Ware Racing for the 2025 season, and Cory does have a little bit of sponsorship and funding, which will help him keep him have a chance and opportunity to be back with this program next year. And to be fair to Cory, he showed a lot of improvement at the end of this year and got a lot better as the season progressed and went on. So I think that Cory's done a fantastic job with this program the last few weeks of the year, and I think it'd be really interesting if they did bring him back. If Cody Ware does end up going here in 2025, I would be disappointed but not surprised. Now, to his credit, he did have a decent average finish in 2025, which is almost 24, I should say, which is almost better than someone like a Kaz Grau, who is rumored to be going to Spire Motorsports for 2025, according to this account. So I think Cody Ware going full-time with Rick Ware would certainly be interesting. Now, talking about the second car, there's obviously rumors, and we're going to get to the RFK Racing announcement that will be coming in the next couple weeks in just a short little bit, but obviously it's rumors that there's going to be only a second part-time entry instead of a full-time entry for 2025 because of the fact it sounds like one of the Rick Ware charters is going to be sold off to RFK or leased out to RFK for 2025. So that is what's going on with Rick Ware currently at the moment. The other rumor surrounds Jordan Anderson Racing. According to what he has reported, it sounds like Blain, Perkins, and Anthony Alfredo are the most likely candidates to be joining Jordan Anderson Racing in 2025. These two names do not surprise me. Well, one of them does, and the other one doesn't surprise me. We obviously know that Parker Retzlaff will not be back with Jordan Anderson Racing for the 2025 season. We don't know where he's going officially at this point. I think RSS Racing could definitely be a major possibility. Yes, Ryan and Parker had a little bit of feud at Sonoma earlier this year, but I do believe they've gotten that ironed out and sorted out. So that's a possibility that he can head over to RSS Racing, which is a shame that Parker won't be back regardless with Jordan Anderson Racing next year. And if we see both these guys go in the program, that means Jeb Burton probably will not be back with Jordan Anderson Racing, which it sounds very likely that is not going to happen for 2025. As for the two guys going in, Anthony Alfredo, I think, would be a solid choice to go and replace a guy like Parker Retzlaff. I think Anthony did have a very, very solid year in 2024. It sounds like he will not be back with our motorsports, though, for the 2025 season. And especially with some of the funding and sponsorship he does have from companies like Dude Wives, I think he would be a solid driver to go with Jordan Anderson. And I think it's a lateral move compared to Parker Anthony's. I think they both have very similar talent and both have very similar potential to be really good in the sport long term. As for Blain Perkins, I question this one. I know Blain's got funding, and Blain is not a bad dude, but genuinely, Blain is a race car driver. He is not that great of a driver. He has not been good since ARCA West days. He struggled at RSS Racing this year. I think he was the worst full-time driver in the series, basically second before Haley Deegan left and became the worst in full-time points for the season. And I think he got outperformed by Matt DiBenedetto, who didn't even run the full season this year. I just don't see Blain Perkins, if he goes at Joy Anderson Racing, I just don't see him doing well with the team. I think Maya Snyder would not be an awful option, and I had heard some people are saying maybe Chandler Smith to Joy Anderson Racing, with him likely now going back to Joe Gibbs Racing at this point. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to the rest of this silly season, but I do think there's some big moves coming down the pipeline and some big changes that might be happening very, very soon for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. Now, if you're on social media over the course of the last couple days, you probably saw some very interesting tweets surrounding Carson Hocevar. He put up a tweet surrounding Kyle Larson in the 5 car, the 9 car for Chase Elliott, and I believe the number 48 car for Alex Bowman as well. And he had a lot of people talking in conversation. Now, some originally were saying that he was just trying to create a little conversation and probably was just trying to get a little bit of attention. However, I have a little bit of a theory in regards to what this is kind of indicating. My theory is remember, about a month or so ago, it was reported on Door Bumper Clear that Spire Motorsports is expected to become a mini Hendrick Motorsports and go to a Tier 1 status starting in 2025. And you think about Spire and the connections to Hendrick Motorsports. Hendrick Motorsports has been working a lot closer. Obviously, Roger Crew, sponsored by HendrickCars.com. They, of course, are heavily working with that group over there in the Truck Series. And Roger, of course, is expected to be back there in 2025. It's also been rumored that they are expected to have a 4th part-time entry for 2025, and rumors are that maybe Roger Carruth or some other drivers like a Cory Joy could make their NASCAR Cup Series debut in this 4th car. They get drivers under the Hendrick Development Group an opportunity to get into the Cup Series, which would be super interesting. Or maybe we could see drivers on the outside in different forms of racing come and drive that 4th part-time entry. I think that what this is that they're looking at trying to have big expansion in the future, right? Obviously, Spire Motorsports is looking for some big stuff to happen, and you look at Hendrick Motorsports with the current drivers right now. Obviously, and maybe this couldn't be an indication that Carson in the future could end up over at a team like Hendrick Motorsports, or same thing with Justin Haley. But you look at drivers like Roger Carruth and Cory Joy. Both are development drivers for Hendrick Motorsports, and they're both working very heavily with Hendrick Motorsports. And we know that Roger did make an Xfinity date, made it to start in that 17 car last year at Phoenix, or 2 years ago at the time at Phoenix. So I do think that this has a lot of indication with that. But I think it's very interesting that Carson Hocevar brings this up, and I think that you're going to see Spire Motorsports really take that next big step going forward. This team's been taking things a lot more seriously. They're making the right moves. They're putting people in the right places. They're hiring a lot of big-name individuals. Matt McCall might be going over there at this point. I think there's a lot of big things that are going to be happening over at Spire Motorsports to make that program better. They've got Michael McDowell coming on, which I think is really huge. And I think that this is what the tweet is implying, is that they're about to become a really top-tier organization going into 2025. And I think Spire is going to take those big steps that they're going to need. And they're also going to have some pretty cool drivers going over to the truck program, most likely for 2025, that should be announced in the not-so-distant future. Maybe Kaz Gralla, maybe Andres Perez de Lora. We might see Kyle Busch running their truck program, same with Michael McDowell. Who knows at this point, but there's some big moves coming down the pipeline, and I think there's some big things happening for the Spire Motorsports Group going into the 2025 campaign. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cory Joy. Now, Kelly Crandall put out a very interesting episode and put out a tweet in talking about Cory Joy and his 2025 plans. Cory Joy basically indicated on Stacking Pennies this past week that he is still working on his 2025 plans currently at the moment. He says he has a lot of opportunities and really cool opportunities to be still inside the sport and racing in NASCAR, and also still being in the sport, but doing some sort of broadcasting deal or doing some podcasting or working in the sport as a whole, but not driving a car in 2025. We obviously know that Justin Haley, when the trade happened, when Justin Haley went over to start driving for Spire, it got confirmed that he was going to be driving a number 7 car full-time in 2025. But remember that initial announcement. We all thought it was going to be confirmed at that point that Cory Joy was going to be officially driving for Ricker Racing starting in 2025 from that point. However, it never got officially confirmed that Cory will be full-time with the Ricker Racing Group in 2025. And I think that's why there has not been an official announcement on it at this point. Now, personally, I think Cory Joy, like I mentioned already earlier, I think Cory Joy had done a very solid and decent job with that program. He showed a lot of potential with the team, got a couple top 20 finishes with the program, and didn't make a ton of mistakes near the end of the season. And I think that he is going to feel a lot more comfortable if he heads back to Rick Ware next year. I think he'll feel a lot more comfortable driving for that team and program. If he doesn't somehow head over there next year, what teams could be options? I look at teams in the Truck Series, right? I had heard a rumor that he might have been going to McAnally Hilgam Racing at one point to potentially replace Christian Eckes, who of course is moving up full-time to the NASCAR Xfinity Series with Collin Racing, replacing AJ Allmendinger next year. I think that could be an option. There's some other truck options like Nice Motorsports that are certainly possibilities for 2025. It's no secret that Cory Joy had a terrible year in the 2024 season. I think he really needed a refresh, which is a shame because 2023 for Cory Joy, I thought he had an all-right year, honestly. He had that bad race still at Gateway with Hendrick, but when Chase Elliott got suspended for a race, they needed someone to take over the 9 car. They got Carson Osbar an opportunity. He had Carson being pretty competitive while Cory Joy struggled, but we all know Hendrick Motorsports at Gateway, they have not been very good the 3 years they've been there. So I'm really hoping for Cory that he still gets to be in the sport in some sort of capacity. I still think stacking pennies will stick around for 2025 regardless if he's racing or moving to a different part of the sport. We don't know at the moment, right? But I think that Cory Joy should be racing next year in the Cup Series or a different series. And I think, yes, he's still a little bit getting up to that point. We're getting a little bit older. But I think he could go to Xfinity and be successful too, though Junior Motorsports isn't an option at this point. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see where Cory Joy truly ends up for the 2025 campaign where he is going to be officially racing. But I do think that he'll have something lined up for 2025 that'll probably get signed not too far down the road. I do think some big things will be happening for Cory Joy here very, very soon. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, Tony Stewart very recently was on a podcast, I think, called Cars and Checkers or something like that. And he was speaking about doing NHRA, talking about the family life, among other things. But there's been this little excerpt from this podcast that has been getting a lot of conversation and talk. And it's Tony Stewart's talk and conversation surrounding the charters and the charter system. Tony Stewart basically went on this podcast and basically straight up called out NASCAR for the charters and chartered agreement. He said that the charter agreement is quintessentially a joke and said it's not a good charter agreement. And he also continued on by saying, when you have Rick Hendrick basically saying, I'm tired of this and I don't want to be involved in his negotiations anymore, and he implies that Rick really has never been part of that kind of thing before, that should tell you everything you need to know. Now, obviously, Tony Stewart has lost complete interest in being a NASCAR, right? He no longer wants to really be interested in the sport and wants to be completely out. But Tony Stewart is still connected in a pretty big way for one big reason. Remember, Stewart-Haas Racing is officially shut down and they're no longer a thing in the sport. But Stewart-Haas Racing, before this whole thing went through, they signed the charter agreement with all 4 of their charters. They're still expected to get those charters sold to 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. The problem is 2311 and Front Row Motorsports did not sign the charter agreement, and with the current lawsuit going on at this particular moment, that's holding a lot of things up. I do think Tony is a little bit frustrated because of the fact that he's not gotten the payday that he was expected to get. He wants to be paid that money, which we can't blame him, right? Tony Stewart wants to get paid that money. But going back to Tony Stewart's loss of interest in the sport, Tony Stewart just got fed up with a lot of things in NASCAR. And I think it all started with 2020, when he tried to pick up Kyle Larson for the 2021 season, right? He wanted to get Kyle Larson to be part of his Cup Series program. That obviously did not end up happening because Ford denied it. And at that point, we started seeing the decline from Stewart-Haas Racing. Then a few years later, when Kyle Busch was available, he tried to get Kyle Busch to be part of his program, but Ford basically denied that, I believe, as well. He tried to get drivers like Michael McDowell, Zane Smith to drive for the program, and Zane, of course, went to the Trackhouse/Spire team, even though he's probably going back to Front Row Motorsports in 2025. And obviously, there were some other things that happened where Tony lost interest. They got caught cheating quite a bit, and Tony's focus became on the NHRA and focus on building up a family at this point. I do understand Tony's frustration in a big way, believe me, but I do think that there's definitely some frustration because he wants to get paid right by those organizations. They want to get the charters. They want to expand next year, but with them not signing the charter agreement and only about a month and a half till their charters become officially obsolete for 2311 and front row, those sales are not going to be available, and I don't think NASCAR is going to basically buy up those charters. They're probably only going to be 30 to 32 charter teams in 2025 unless NASCAR finds a way to purchase something in that area. I do understand Tony Stewart's frustration, believe me. I think NASCAR did some things wrong in certain situations, especially with the lawsuit, among other things as well. But to me, I do think Tony Stewart has a right to be a little bit frustrated and upset because he wants to get paid, and I can't blame him for being a little bit frustrated and upset that he's not getting the payday that he truly deserves. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we kind of touched a little bit on this story on Friday, but it was confirmed on Thursday evening that Kyle Busch officially has confirmed after years and years of speculation that he officially will be running the 2025 Chili Bowl Nationals. He'll be, of course, running some USAC races at Ventura County, and I think there's another USAC race in Tulane County that he is going to be running later this December for transitioning to run the 2025 Chili Bowl Nationals. I do believe that he will be getting support from Toyota, which I find to be very, very interesting, and this is something in all good fun. And that's the big thing we'll get to here in a minute. A lot of fans have been wanting Kyle Busch to have the chance and opportunity to run the Chili Bowl Nationals. That's been one of the dream races that we've been wanting. And Kyle Busch has been rumored to be trying to do this for a very, very long time. But now he's going to get that chance and opportunity to run the 2025 Chili Bowl Nationals. He will also be competing in the Tulsa Shootout in early to mid-January, so he'll get a little bit of dirt experience as well. Kyle Busch has been diving in recent years into more dirt racing. He's been doing because of his son. His son Braxton's been doing a lot of dirt racing as well, but Kyle Busch, along with the son, have been doing a lot of dirt racing in recent years. And we've seen Kyle Busch have some wins on the dirt scene, and it's really cool to see near the end of his career, because Kyle Busch is starting to get in the latter stages of his racing career, that he is starting to do some things that he really wants to do. And that's the big thing, right? He's running the Chili Bowl to have fun. It's going to be a challenge for Kyle Busch, though, because Kyle Busch will have to run the heat races and will have to go through all the mains. And depending on where he finishes in his day of the heats, because of how they run the format for the heats, he may have to go all the way from like the F main to the E main. But if Kyle Busch can somehow in his first try of the Chili Bowl go on to all the way to the A main, that is going to be super impressive. But if there's any driver in the field that doesn't have as much dirt experience that could do it, it is definitely Kyle Busch. I hope we get to see other Cup drivers run this event like a Connor Zilic isn't going to be doing, but I would love to see Chase Elliott. I'd love to see Shane Van Gisbergen. Maybe Haley Dean comes and runs a Chili Bowl. But there's going to be a lot of great competition. Jade Avedissian, Kyle Larson probably. People like Brad Sweet might be back this year. Tanner Thorsum, Chris Windham, people who have made the final of the Chili Bowl Nationals in the past. But I go back to that most important thing. He's having fun with this. He's doing something that he really wants to do, and he's doing something that is really, really fun. Kyle Busch had an awful 2024 for his standards. He had a bad year as a whole, had his first winless season in the NASCAR Cup Series, failed to make the playoffs for the first time, I believe, since 2012 when he drove the 18 car for JGR. And it just was not a good year for Kyle Busch. There was a lot of frustration. You could hear it on the radio, and wasn't happy with the direction of way things are going. But they are expected to have some big pickups for that program in 2025 and some really big and massive hirings for next year. I think Kyle Busch will have a chance to be very, very competitive, and I think that you're going to have a lot of eyeballs that are truly going to tune in to this year's Chili Bowl. I think you're going to see some pretty big other names that are going to be announced and showing up. We haven't gotten the official full entry list for the 2025 Chili Bowl Nationals. They don't release that until they get to 100. I think they're around 75 to 80 if I'm not mistaken, so they are getting closer and closer to fully having the lineup set for that, and I do think you're going to have around 400 to 500 entries this year, which is going to make the event even more stacked. I'm excited, though, that Kyle Busch is going to be competing. I think he's got a really great chance and a very strong opportunity to get it done, and I think he'll be super competitive, and I think he will have a chance and opportunity to compete for the win in the Chili Bowl Nationals, though it's going to be one of the hardest races to win, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about RFK Racing. As it was reported by Bob Pockers and many reporters in the industry that tomorrow there is going to be a major announcement from RFK Racing that is going to take place at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, and 7 p.m. West Coast Time. RFK Racing will be announcing some pretty major stuff for the 2025 season. It's expected that the PR representative from Kroger will be there, which is really, really important. And there's some other big name individuals that are expected to be there for the event to announce some big stuff. Chris Buescher is going to be there. Brad Keselowski, one of the co-owners, is going to be there. I believe Jack Roush will be at this press conference. And Steve Newmark, the president of RFK Racing, will be there at present for the meeting at this event. Now, what is this big announcement that is coming from RFK? Well, I just mentioned a second ago. We talked about this not too long ago as well, early last week. But we know that Brad said, I believe on Sunday night after the championship race had concluded, they had some pretty big announcements that were going to be coming over the course of the next couple of weeks. We didn't get an announcement for last week, so we were waiting for the announcement to come this week. And that big announcement is going to be two pretty major and huge announcements for RFK Racing for 2025. The first big one is that Kroger will be leaving JTG Daugherty Racing and they will be joining RFK Racing in 2025. Kroger's been heavily listed with the RFK Racing organization over the course of the last couple of years. Well, last couple of weeks, I should say. Well, really, since about July or August, there's been rumors about them leaving. Originally, we all thought that Kroger was going to be headed over to a team like Joe Gibbs Racing, but Tad and Jody Geschecter, I believe, are no longer working with that group anymore. So I do certainly think that them going to RFK makes sense. And I do think, if I'm not mistaken, that they have worked in the past with RFK Racing. And I think that Kroger, especially if one of the biggest chains out there, one of the biggest grocery chains, a Fortune 100 company coming in to sponsor, is really huge. Now, with that, they are going to be expanding to a 3-car operation because Kroger is going to need a car where they can use all the funding for that event. So who is the driver going to be for this? Could it be someone like a Chandler Smith? Maybe, but probably not. Could it be Zane Smith? Maybe, but probably not because he's probably going to front row despite the lawsuit. What about someone else like a Riley Herbst, perhaps? Maybe, but I don't think he's going to be going there because of 2311. What about Matty D? Probably not. Everyone is saying it's going to be Ryan Preece, and Ryan Preece has been the heavy favorite to go to RFK Racing for 2025, really since all reports started coming out from Adam Stern and Jordan Bianchi. He's been the favorite for the C. Many people at RFK Racing do believe that Ryan Preece has not been given a fair shake at any organization, and I find that to be very, very true. Yes, he wasn't amazing with Stewart Racing, but we need to kind of go back to when he actually drove for very competent organizations in the lower series. Beginning with Joe Gibbs Racing. When he had a chance and opportunity to drive for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2017 and 2018, he went on to win multiple races during that time. Won in 2017 in a photo finish at Iowa against Kyle Benjamin, and won in 2018 at Bristol in the number 18 car. And then got a chance to move up full-time with JTG Daugherty Racing in 2019, where this Kroger sponsorship really came from originally. And he just did not do good there, but let's be real, they really struggled. Chris Buescher had some good runs, but Chris Buescher got traded for 2020 to go to RFK Racing for that year, and they brought Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in, and they really weren't as fantastic. Then after 2021, when they went down to a one-car team because they sold off their charter, for 2022, he went and started driving part-time before they became Tricon Garage, DGR Racing, and he ran very solidly and got a couple wins at Nashville Super Speedway and did better than drivers like Haley Deegan and the Gray brothers, who were just really okay at the team, but they really were not that great. Ryan Preece then got the opportunity to move up to Stewart Racing in 2023, and that's the first year that Stewart Racing failed to win a race. Kevin Harvick made the playoffs, but Kevin Harvick failed to win in his farewell season. And then 2024, near the end of this year, Ryan Preece really showed a lot of improvement. And I really believe that Ryan Preece is someone that I actually respect a lot. He is someone, in my opinion, that is very, very underrated. He's someone who has showed a lot of potential over the course of the last couple of years. And I think that if he gets the right opportunity and the right car to work with, he can be someone that is super, super successful. And I think he is a very talented race car driver. He's been a winner in the modified series many, many times, and there's not a lot of other drivers that I would choose. And you look at this, if he truly goes there, all 4 drivers from Stewart Racing got upgrades. You've got Chase Briscoe going to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. That's a massive upgrade, taking over from Mark Truex Jr. You've got Noah Gragson going to Spire Motorsports. They're a Tier 1 team next year, so that's going to be an upgrade for 2025. You've got Josh Berry going to the Wood Brothers, which I think is an upgrade. And then you've got, of course, Ryan Preece most likely going to RFK, which I also think is certainly a pretty massive upgrade for the team. I look at this and I think this is a really good move from RFK. I don't know who else you could put behind the wheel of this team, but I think that Preece is a very solid and a pretty underrated driver who has not, like I said, been given the right opportunities and the right and fair shakes. I like Preece a lot. I think he's a really good driver, and I think he will do solid at RFK Racing. Now, do I think he's going to do better than Chris Buescher or Brad Keselowski? Probably not. But I think he's someone who has got a lot of potential, and I certainly do expect that he'll run pretty solidly and pretty good with that program if he truly ends up there, which I think we're going to be announcing tomorrow, which is really exciting and really great stuff. It sounds like he will be there in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Now, I did a video covering this story yesterday on this channel. But it was officially confirmed yesterday morning, early in the morning, that 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports, and they released a statement yesterday confirming that they will be for sure competing as open teams in 2025 at this time, as NASCAR has removed the provision where open teams could not sue NASCAR. NASCAR sent at least a slight olive branch to the teams where they have removed that clause, so they will be competing as open teams in 2025. Now, something that does need to be clarified, though, is that while they are as of now open teams, they're still currently appealing into the Fourth Court of Appeals to try to find a way to get their charters back for 2025. This is definitely a slight win for 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports, because had they not gotten that removed from NASCAR where they couldn't compete even if they're an open team, that could have been the end for 2311 Racing or Front Row. That could have been it for Tyler Reddick at the program, Bubba Wallace at the program, and that could have also been the end for Noah Gragson and, of course, Todd Gillen, and potentially Zane Smith and Riley Herbst, who are heavy rumored to be going to those programs for the 2025 season. To me, that is definitely at least a little bit of a win for the teams. Now, NASCAR does have until later today. They have hired a new lawyer on the appeal side of things, but they have until today to make a decision if they're going to protest the appeal or not. If they protest the appeal and the judge and the courts do side, it may not be till March till they officially make a decision on the appeal. And we may be waiting till late March to late March on a decision right there. I think this is definitely a win for them. Now, obviously, going all the way back to the beginning, 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports are currently suing NASCAR at the moment on antitrust grounds. They have Jeffrey Kessler as the lawyer for the teams, while they have Chris Yates as the main lawyer on the NASCAR side. And both those guys have gone up against each other in the past, and a lot of times Jeffrey Kessler has been able to go on. They had tried to request for preliminary injunction so they could compete as chartered teams, and then basically the judge said, no, we're not going to give you to because you haven't had the burden, and there's not been anything that has happened. They've said they could happen if we don't sign it, but it basically would happen. But then, of course, Denny Hamlin said about a week or so ago during Championship Week that 2311 could miss the Daytona 500 in the Clash had they not had a chance to compete as even an open organization. With them removing this clause, this now will let 2311 Racing and Front Row compete as open teams in 2025. But like I said, there is a chance they could end up winning the appeal if NASCAR does not decide to reject it. I also have a little bit of a theory in regards to why NASCAR might have removed it, and I think Eric Eastep brings up a very good point. NASCAR would be looking absolutely horrendous if they did not allow guys like Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick and Noah Gragson and, of course, Todd Gillen to drive. 4 drivers that bring a lot of eyeballs in, especially Bubba Wallace. 4 drivers who are very, very talented, and I think it would have been a massive shame if especially your regular season champion from the prior year, Tyler Reddick, ended up missing the next season because of the fact that they didn't sign the charter agreement or didn't even run as open teams. That would have been a massive and major, major loss for that program. So I think that's a pretty major reason why they decided to go ahead and kind of remove this thing so their drivers didn't get affected. Now, what does this mean for them going forward? Will they run the Clash? Maybe. I don't know, though. I would not be surprised if you don't see 2311 in Front Row unless they get the preliminary injunction appeal 1. I don't know if you'll see those teams show up at the Clash at Bowman Gray Stadium. That could certainly be something to watch out for, but that probably will get announced down the road. Now, about the Daytona 500, you're probably going to see them run the Daytona 500, but you're probably going to have a lot of other open teams that are going to show up. We talked about NBM Motorsports. They're going to run the Daytona 500 this year. Imagine a team like NBM beats the teams like Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace and some of the front row cars like Noah Gragson and, of course, Todd Gillen. Even though I do think front row will very likely have a great chance of winning the pole for the Daytona 500, so I don't think the front row cars most likely miss. Imagine if big names, though, like Tyler Reddick, who won the regular season title, and Bubba Wallace, who, of course, went on to could win a couple races this year, potentially, with how much speed he showed at the end of the year, especially with his new crew chief, Charles Deneke, coming in, who I think is an absolutely amazing and really, really good crew chief. I certainly think that could be a bad possibility. And I think about this, too. There's been rumors that they may even have a fourth car for 2025. There's rumors that Mark Truex Jr. is going to run the Daytona 500. So you may not just have 3 2311 cars if Riley Herbst goes to 2311, but you might have 4 2311 racing cars run the Daytona 500 with Mark Truex Jr. And potentially throughout the year, guys like Corey Heim, maybe Kurt Busch, Carl Edwards, or other drivers like maybe Kamui Kobayashi comes back and races. That could certainly be a possibility, but does this mean Mark Truex Jr. will run it all next year, or is he going to make the decision to move and do something else? Because we know he's going to run with Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year, at least on a part-time basis. So that could certainly be something that we're going to have to kind of keep our eyes out on and watch for. But as for 2311 and front row, do they decide to drop? Does this end the lawsuit? As of now, I don't think it is. But I think that NASCAR is still on the upper hand a little bit when it comes to the lawsuit, because I do think that the teams, they have provided some very good points for sure throughout this whole thing. But I do think at least it's good to see they will be on the track in 2025. Again, they still have an opportunity and chance. If they can win the appeal, they still have the opportunity and chance to still get their charters back. I think it's going to be tougher for them to still get those charters back, especially if the judge denies it. And if NASCAR basically comes in and says, hey, we basically are going to protest this and we're not going to let you basically appeal this, and then the judge that is part of the case could basically side with NASCAR, because it sounds like the original judge on the case, Judge Whitney, he basically sided with NASCAR more than anything, and I think that's something that kind of wasn't talked about as much. To me, though, you think about everything going on. What happens to the sale of those SHR charters? That's another big thing, is that do those SHR sales, except the Trackhouse one, which is already confirmed at this point, does NASCAR just buy those charters back altogether, or do they do something else with them? I'm really not sure at this point. To me, though, I think there still is a good chance that the teams can win this, but NASCAR also has a really good chance, especially Michael Jordan having a lot of money as well coming into this. I do think both sides have very compelling and very interesting arguments. I think we all know the business model needs to get better. We know the teams are going to be getting more money in the deal, but we do know the business model really needs to get a fair shake and definitely needs to get better for sure going forward. So I really hope things get resolved going forward, but I think this lawsuit won't be going away anytime soon, and there's a lot of changes that probably need to be made going forward for things to definitely get better. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think 2311 and front row will basically win the lawsuit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And who do you think will go to RFK if it's not Ryan Preece? Let me know in the comments below. I don't think there's any more content dropping today on the channel. Tomorrow on the channel, you're going to see the first team preview from Hendrick Motorsports, most likely. And you're also going to see the video, most likely, in RFK Racing's official announcement right before I head to work. And then on Wednesday, we'll have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. And I've got some end-year content dropping still. I'll probably be going through the top 10 teams of 2024 at some point this week. And there's some other great content dropping right before the end of the week as well that you will be able to see. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.